Greetings and welcome to online lecture 6 on unit number 3, that is fluid kinematics. This lecture we are going to discuss the different types of flow lines. Especially as per the definition of kinematics, it is nothing but the geometry of fluid motion. And in order to describe this geometry, the different flow lines are used. So the flow, whenever a fluid is in motion, its innumerable particles move along a certain lines, depending upon the conditions of the flow. Though flow lines are of several types, yet some important from subject point of view are discussed in this particular session. So these flow lines are path lines, streamlines, and straight lines. As far as the path line is concerned, it is the path followed by a fluid particle when it is in motion. Path line shows the direction of a particular fluid particle as it moves ahead. In general, this is the curve in three-dimensional space. However, if the conditions are such that the flow is two-dimensional, the curve becomes two-dimensional. So path lines are generally used in Lagrangian approach, where the particle approach is to be studied or where this particular particle is to be found. Suppose these are the path lines for three particles. This is the path of particle number 1. Similarly, this is the path of particle number 2, particle number 3, like that. So the equation of path line for particle at a given time, we can say, so at t is equal to 1, or what is the distance traveled, x distance traveled from 1 to 2, this is the x distance traveled, this is y distance traveled, this three-dimensional is z distance traveled. So accordingly, these are the components of velocities in path line for a particular particle. So like that, in path line, individual particle velocity is monitored, individual particle velocity is estimated. So resultant velocity vector is the u into I hat plus v into g hat plus w into k hat for a particular velocity particle. So this is the path line. Generally, scientists use this particular approach when they study the rarefied gas during the Lagrangian approach. Streamline, these are the imaginary lines uh, and which can be drawn within the flow so that the tangent to it at any point on it indicates the velocity at that particular point. So any flow description, if we draw any imaginary lines and the tangent to it at any point gives the velocity at that particular point. Suppose if we consider the streamline on xy plane as shown in figure, let v be the resultant velocity, which is tangential to this particular streamline, and it makes angle theta with the horizontal. So it has two components, x velocity component is u, y velocity component is v, respectively. Then from let theta be the angle made by v with respect to horizontal, and then we have tan theta is equal to dy upon dx, or we can say y velocity component and or y velocity component and x velocity component. If we rearrange this for two-dimensional flow, we can say it that is dx upon u and v upon dx upon u, that is equal to dy upon u. Or in other words, we can write v into dx minus u into dy, that is equal to 0. Similarly, equation for three-dimensional flow, this is dx upon u is equal to dy upon v, that is equal to 0. So this is the equation of streamline. So there are few problems. In that case, if the velocity distribution is given, that means x, y, and z component of velocities are given. We can estimate the streamline equation for streamline in this particular form. So streamline exhibits some characteristics. All streamlines cannot intersect itself, nor two streamlines can cross each other. Then there cannot be any movement of the fluid across the streamlines. The streamline spacing varies inversely as the velocity Converging streamlines in any particular direction shows the acceleration in that particular direction. Whereas a path line gives the path of one particular uh, particle at successive instant time. A streamline indicates the direction of number of particles at the same instant. So these particular lines are generally used in Eulerian approach, that is a field approach. The series of streamline represents the flow pattern at any instant. So in steady flow, the pattern of streamline remains invariant with time, and the path lines and streamlines will then be identical. In that case, in unsteady flow, rather, the pattern of streamlines may or may not remain the same at the next instant. So this is a pattern of fluid. Generally, streamlines, they are generally drawn in the computational fluid dynamics analysis. So this is a result of a computational fluid dynamics. So all these are the streamlines. They are obtained using the given input data like velocity components in x and y directions. So generally, these are the imaginary lines in practice, but still these lines can be drawn using CFD technique. Then the third line, that is a streak line. These are actually a curve which gives an instantaneous picture of the location of the fluid particles which have passed through the given point. The part taken by smoke coming out of the chimney, that we can say that is, because in order to visualize the flow, uh, these streak lines are used. It may be applicable for any experimental work. To trace the motion of the fluid particles, a color or dye may be injected into the flowing fluid, and the resultant colored filament lines at a given location gives the streak line. This is shown in figure. So suppose in this particular case, the smoke is injected and this shows the streamlines. So these are the streamlines, but actually for visualization purpose, so the stress of the color dye, or in this case, the stress of motion of the fluid particles by a smoke gives the aerofoil section. So to visualize the flow, generally the color is injected into the flow passage to recognize this streamline. Note that the streak lines, they are coincident if they originate at the same point. For an unsteady flow, that example given, a person giving out whiff of smoke from the cigarette, the path of streak and streamlines all are different. So in the steady state, all three lines are identical, but unsteady state, all three lines are different. So these are some pictures we can see here. The smoke coming out from the chimney. It gives actually traces the motion of the air, so it is vertically in this direction. Or in some cases, it is intentionally released that smoke. Suppose in the wind tunnel, so the smoke is released uh, in order to trace the flow pattern over the vehicle or automobile. So this is the case. Or even in some experiment also, suppose in this particular Reynolds experiment, in order to recognize the flow pattern for different Reynolds number of through different pipes as well or through different diameter pipes. So these are the all Reynolds number except this Reynolds number. This is for laminar flow. So here we can realize this is for turbulent flow. There is a separate experiment you have that is using the streak lines. The color dye, we can recognize whether the flow is laminar or turbulent. So this is about the streak line, which are generally uh, used to trace the motion of the fluid particles, like in wind tunnel also. There is no specific equation for streak line, but there are specific equation for path line and streamlines. So uh, that's it from this particular session. So at the end of this particular session, we should be able to describe path line, streamline, and streak line with the practical examples. So path line is especially used for Lagrangian approach, where a particular fluid particle needs to be analyzed or needs to be monitored. And streamlines, they are used in Eulerian approach, where the flow pattern in particular zone, when the fluid particles are passing through a particular zone, what should be its flow pattern, what is the behavior of fluid, whether the flow is laminar or turbulent, or even in further for aerodynamic study or vehicle dynamic study, in order to trace out where the forces are more: drag force, leak force, separation point, wake region. So all these parameters are calculated by identifying or by recognizing the flow pattern on the body. So that's it. So these are three the lines where generally used to describe the type, describe the flow motion. So that's it from this particular lecture. Thank you.